I am here with one of my very good close friends. Actually, she inspired me a lot to do what we're doing here at Just Lean In. Her name is Miss Pam McCoskey, and you're in Arizona. Are you in Arizona?
No, I'm in Colorado.
She's in Colorado, and her son and I were really good friends in grade school. His name is Blake McCoskey, and he started Tom's Shoes. He's an amazing entrepreneur and does a lot for charity. And he's still a dear friend of mine. And her daughter, Paige, owns Aviator Nation. You should totally check them out. They have an incredible activewear line. I know a lot of you guys love to work out, and you should check out her stuff. It's all handmade. There's a really neat story about that. You can Google her. And then her son, Tyler, he's also an entrepreneur, has amazing kids, and just a really great family. And I'm blessed to be friends with Pam. Pam and I probably have stayed the closest out of everyone in the family, just because everybody's so busy, and she relays, I'm sure, the news to Blake and stuff, what's going on with us. So I appreciate having her on here tonight. She inspired me in a lot of ways. She always has worked out most of her life. She used to have an aerobic studio in her house when she lived in Arlington. And I just thought that was so cool, and just always thought she was such a cool mom, and inspired me to work out, inspired me to be an entrepreneur, inspired me to stay in shape. And I really feel like I've modeled a lot of my life around kind of like Pam, and I just think of her as like a family member to me. And now we've even got a closer bond, and unfortunate circumstances. My brother, who Pam knew and was friends with, and actually had sent him an Aviator Nation t-shirt not long ago. And my brother, Chris, who passed away, loved Pam and the family. And so she's been super supportive. To tell you how close I am with her, I actually texted her the day it happened. Because honestly, well, for two things, I was looking desperately to connect to people that I know like care about me, but I also was looking for people to connect with that have gone through this particular type of loss, which is a sibling loss. And sibling loss, as I'm sure Pam will agree when she shares her story, is different from any other kind of loss. Not that we're comparing grief here at all, but it's different because, and I would love to hear her take on it, and she may disagree or agree with me on this, but you don't really just lose a sibling, but in some ways you lose part of your parents too. And so you're kind of, your role changes, especially if that's your only sibling. And it's a really difficult journey to go through. And she had to go through it really young. I had to go through it older. And so I want to just jump right in, Pam, and I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'm just going to give you the floor. What we're really talking about today, or what the audience and what we're trying to share about, is a couple of things: how grief affects you mentally, physically, spiritually, how you felt the day, where were you the day that you found out about Tom? Do you remember how you felt? Do you remember what your parents, how they reacted? Do you remember the things people did that were super helpful? Do you remember things maybe people did not intentionally, though, that maybe weren't super helpful? And I know it's been 40 plus years since this happened, for 50 plus years since this happened. How have things changed for you as far as how you feel about Tom? And do you still cry about Tom? And do you still think about him every day? And does it get easier? And can you just share everything? And we also want to hear a little bit about what we think he had, and so we can get the word out about that too. And I really appreciate you sharing tonight.
Sure. Well, first of all, it happened on October 7th, 1965. And I was in Arlington High School. I was a junior. And I went to I don't know what was wrong with me. I just didn't feel good. So I went to the nurse's office, and I said, I need to go home. I don't feel good. She goes, well, you don't have temperature. What's wrong with you? I said, I don't know, but I need to go home. And she let me call my dad. My dad came and picked me up, and I got home, and we weren't there very long, maybe 10 minutes. And we get a call that my brother had collapsed on the field playing intramural football at TCU. He had caught a pass and had fallen down and was unconscious. And his fraternity brother tried to do mouth to mouth, but this was 1965. They didn't even have CPR. So they then decided to take him immediately to the emergency room. And so they took him to the hospital. And at that point, we were on our way over from Arlington to the hospital in Fort Worth. And at first, when we first heard it, you don't think that he's going to die. You just think, oh, he's in the hospital. But by the time we got there, they had done open heart surgery and he never regained consciousness. And well, I think from a sister's point of view, it's different from a mother's for sure. I know that my mother went into very deep depression. My father as well, but my mother was more vocal and more emotional. And she ended up living to be 90. And still to this day, she would cry over Tom and before she died. I mean, she never got over it, never. And I had a really difficult time with it because my deal, and you might be having this as well, Emily, but I felt like it should have been me. Yeah. My brother was like Mr. Cool. He ran for president at TCU and his slogan was all the way with JFK. He looked like a young John F. Kennedy. And he modeled for a men's clothing store. He was just super cool and handsome and just everything that you would want in a son. And my mom had it in him.
Was he your only sibling?
Yes. Oh. He was my only sibling. And actually, Blake is named after Tom. Blake's real name, that, is Thomas Blake McCoskey. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like I went through the cracks of a floor. I felt like I was underneath what was going on above me because I didn't even know who to call or what to do. I was only 14 years old, almost 15. And so, of course, Mike came over immediately. And, and we were dating then. So he, of course, was very, very helpful and very comforting. And his mom and dad and, and the neighbors and my good girlfriends and Janice Osborne and, Sharon Nolan and all the Terry Miller, I could go on, Pat. But all of those women came and surrounded me, but it still wasn't, it was real, but it wasn't really real. It was like, I'm sure you felt that way too. You're like,
I feel that way. I'm only 70 days into this.
I know.
Yeah.
And my friends helped, but, actually when, and then we went through the funeral and everything and had to do that. And we started a scholarship at TCU for the Sigma Chi's, a Tom Doler Award. And it's really interesting because Clay Ellis, who a lot of people in Arlington knew, he passed away, but Clay Ellis won the Sigma Chi Thomas Edwin Doler Award. And I didn't even know that until I took the kids in to get braces and it was on his wall. And I had no idea. But anyway, that was just a side thing that I thought was interesting. But then after that, I mean, I really, really struggled with, like, my parents didn't talk to me that much. I didn't feel like, I mean, they were grieving together, but I don't remember. I mean, I really don't remember them ever coming to me and saying, how are you doing? And I didn't even really think about that until you just asked me about all this, because just a second, turn on. I just remember feeling really alone. And even though my friends came over and I had Mike, I just felt really alone and I felt really, really guilty. Yes. And I felt guilty about it for a long time. And do you want to hear about what he ended up having? My dog's barking, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear.
Just a second. Rufus, sorry. Rufus, okay. Stop.
I think too, like something that you and I experienced that's also different is a sudden death and a death. And I know that you were only 14 or 15, but that to me, like, that's a really like important, like, part of your life. And so feelings and all these things, like, even though I was 45 and you were 15, like, I don't in some ways it could have been harder for you. I mean, you didn't have like kids to like distract you. I mean, you had friends and stuff, but like a sudden death, there's like no preparation for this.
No. And the way that I determined what had caused his death, this was the hardest thing for my mom to accept, because on the autopsy report, it just said sudden death, heart stopped, no, unknown. You know, like they had no clue. The heart just stopped, but they had no clue. And so my mother never had an answer. So in 1990, as you know, I wrote Butterbusters, and I dedicated the book to my brother and Tom. And a lot of people wrote me letters wanting to know who he was and if he had passed away in Vietnam or something. And I said, no, his heart stopped, you know, and I told a few people, but then I started working right after my tour. I got questioned a lot about on the tour. And then when I got home, I started doing research on heart disease. And at first I thought, oh, maybe he had an enlarged heart, because that's kind of a common thing. And then, you know, and I just kept going through medical journals and just trying to figure out what in the world could take a child of 19's life, you know, instantly. And then all they said is his heart stopped. So anyway, through my research, I discovered an organization called SADS, and it's Sudden Arrhythmia Death Syndrome. And the syndrome is also referred to as the long QT syndrome, because the only way you can determine if a child has it is you have to be doing an exercising electrocardiogram. It can't just be like a regular, you have to be like working out when you're doing it. And what happens, there's letters at the top of the electrocardiogram, like A, B, C, D, whatever, but between the Q and the T, there's an elongated lapse of time. And that is the only way at this time that they can determine if a child has this syndrome. Wow. And the thing is, there are symptoms. The symptoms are unexplained fainting. My brother never did that. And you know, the other symptoms is sudden death. But the unexplained fainting I found really strange, because I had never witnessed him doing that. And it usually also affects boys between the ages of 8 and 28, more so than girls. It can happen almost any way. Someone could jump into a cold swimming pool and it makes their heart go into fibrillation. And that's what happened with my brother when he caught the football. It kind of, you know, it wasn't like a hard throw, but it hit his chest and it made his heart go into fibrillation. And so anyway, that's just some things that I've tried to spread the word about. You hear about athletes all the time, like basketball players. I found so much research when I was working on it that die suddenly, you know, on the field or on the court. And whenever I do get or see that anywhere, I always try to write a letter to whoever the people are, especially when we used to have a regular newspaper, which we don't anymore. And I would always write a letter and just ask them questions and explain what I went through. And because not only just so they would know, but it's hereditary. So they, you know, if they had other children, they need to have their child checked out. And after, when I was writing the book, the second book, I'm Listening, I actually took all my kids to the doctor and we all had exercising electrocardiograms, and none of us have long QT. So I just wanted to let people know, just for their other kids. And like I said, the hardest thing for me was just not knowing until I connected with a doctor, Michael Vincent, at in Salt Lake City in Utah. And he was the president of SADS. And he talked to me for a long time, and I told him about what I was doing. And I was getting ready to go on book tour, actually, for I'm Listening. And I told Warner Books, I said, look, I don't care what, but I have to go to Salt Lake City on tour this time. I don't know if I went the first time, but anyway, so they set it all up and I got to go and meet him and meet all the people. They gave me a beautiful heart pin that I still wear when I ride horses on my shirt. But anyway, I found out through him that they were in the process of trying to isolate a gene And I know that you know this because you've had a baby pretty recently, but you know how when the baby, they take blood out of the bottom of their foot, like pretty soon, right after they're born. Yeah, to test. And that's what they're trying to do, is that at birth, they could do that test. And they're really close on the isolating of the gene. So, I mean, I think there is, hope that eventually, if all babies were tested, we wouldn't have this problem, because the good news is it's totally treatable. Totally treatable.
Interesting you said this. Did you get a chance to watch our co-CEO, Jen Rue? So
no.
when you have time,
okay.
So her brother, he was 20 and he just got in the lake with his buddies and they were just swimming. It was only 3 feet of water and he drowned. And now they believe that it was something with his heart.
Yeah. His heart probably stopped. Maybe it was the cold water and it was a shock to the system. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It was terrible. And her story is very similar to yours. So did you ever get counseling, or did you go to any grief support group?
I didn't. I mean, I just don't remember doing any of that. Back then I was just a 14-year-old kid, and it was, it just wasn't like, my mom and dad were so grief stricken that I don't think they really even thought, no one in our family at that time had ever had counseling. And that wasn't even something, that they talked about. It was just, I'll never forget the very first trip we took, like right after. I don't even know why, but my dad and mom wanted to go to San Antonio and see the Alamo. Who knows why? And it was the worst trip of my life. And I will never forget it, because we drove and I was in the back seat. And I just couldn't wait for it to be over. Yeah. So then I kind of started isolating myself. Mm-hmm. And, I couldn't really talk to my parents about it because, my mom was crying all the time and my dad was still working. So he had to go to work at General Motors. So life went on, but the guilt tore me up. And to tell you the honest truth, it took until, this was in 1965, and it was 2 years ago, on our anniversary, Mike Blake gave us a gift of going to a place called Soul Adventure. And it was in Sedona. And it was like a couple's getaway, kind of a retreat. And when we were there for 4 or 5 days. It was really a cool deal. And they did ask Mike and I why we were there, because we love each other. And we've been married for almost 53 years. And then they just kind of worked on each of us individually, because they thought our marriage was pretty darn good.
Right.
So, after all this time.
It's fantastic.
So through that, the very last day, and it was actually on our anniversary, May 23rd, we went up in these Jeeps up to this mountain. And in Sedona, they have these pits that are like, I don't know what, it's some kind of, I don't even know what it is, but it's supposed to be almost like magnetic kind of thing. And so we went up there and we had something to fill out that, we wanted to talk about or whatever. And on mine, the top thing, or the only thing I even wrote down, was, I don't understand why it wasn't me. My brother was the light of my mother's life. Tom hung the moon. And that's fine. He was awesome. I loved him. I adored him. But anyway, that was what I wrote down. And then Mike wrote some things down. And then we kind of sat under a tree and talked about it. And so I think the guy's name was Scott. And Scott asked me, he said, Pam, what do you think would have happened if it would have been you and not your brother? And I said, I never really thought about that. He said, would Blake, Paige, and Tyler be alive? Would Tom's shoes be here? There's so many reasons I guess I'm supposed to be here, but I never felt that way. And I'm sure you're crying too. I felt like I wasn't worth it. I knew he was important. And I just thought, like, I'm just a girl, I'm just a girl who is very sad, but I finally went over the other edge. And when we sat there and cried and talked, and I said, this is the first time that I realized that I was here for a purpose, just like you're here for a purpose. Lean in and everything else and your 3 children. But have you ever had those feelings?
Yes, I have. And I understand what you're talking about with you say your mom and dad were so close to your brother. And look, we know that is Chara. How did you say Tari? What do they call your mom?
Char baby.
Char baby. We know she loved you. Of course, she loved you equally, but it's just different.
Yeah.
And I understand that. My mother and father, there was something about Chris. He was just I was always on the go and always a little bit more independent. Not that he was dependent, but just more, not as much as a family person as Chris was with them. So they would hang out together a lot.
Yeah.
And they were just, and when I lost Chris that day, as I explained, I feel as if I did. I lost half of my parents.
Yeah.
And I feel, and the only people that understand my pain, well, in my family would be my parents. And when I want to call and be sad and talk, I feel guilty because it might be a moment where they're having a break from being sad.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to just make it more sad. So it is the worst. It is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I hope it's the worst thing that will ever happen to me. When you lost your precious parents, did you feel any sort of sense of not peace, but knowing that they were with Tom?
That gave me a lot of peace because they both were Christians. And
yes.
I knew, and Tom was a Christian. And so interesting, he became a Christian about 2 months before he died. He started going to I don't know what the deal was. He started going to the big church in downtown Arlington, even though he was in Fort Worth. And he started just going. And we'd always, we grew up going to church and stuff, but he wasn't a Christian. And I wasn't either at that point. But anyway, he had started going to church and he had asked me if I would go with him the next Sunday. And I believe it happened on a Thursday. And so I never got to go with him, but he told me, that he'd been going to this church, and that was very, very, heartwarming, and that made me feel good, of course, and then my parents became believers. My mom didn't become a believer till she was about 80. So really? I know we're all together. Yeah, I know. Right. And I know, and actually I would kind of shared my, share the gospel basically with her. I'd given her some books, but it happened up here in Colorado. She just didn't get it. She said, well, I'm a good person.
He probably also was angry with God.
Yes.
And it's okay. Because God can take it from what I understand. I want to talk a little bit about signs. Do you, and I know you and I are both Christians. I know the first thing I was clinging to any kind of sign and almost went a little crazy trying to find signs. And sometimes I just say, forget it. I don't need any signs. And then I think I'm getting a sign. And then when I don't want a sign, do you get signs from Tom?
I haven't, but Blake has. Blake has done kind of a deal where it's almost like a memory thing. It's a doctor that does it. And he did it one time, and he swears that he saw my mom and Tom.
Like in a dream, or?
I don't know. I mean, he said it was so real, and my dad wasn't in it, but he's, he said that he, in fact, I think he told me, this was about 4 or 5 years ago. I think he told me that my mom said not to worry because they were all okay.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
I've been hearing that they come to us through other people sometimes, not necessarily directly to us.
Right.
And I have friends say, I've had a dream about Chris, and he said he's
really?
like right after that. So what did you love about Tom?
Oh man, He was like a big brother. So when we were young, he, didn't want me around. He was 4 years older than me. And but then when I got to, when we moved to Texas in 1963, and then he went to TCU and I was in ninth grade and that year, and then went ahead to Arlington High. We didn't have much in common. Like, I was just kind of his little sister. But once we moved to Texas, we became really close. And I don't know if it's because I became more of a teenager and we had more in common. But from that time on, I loved it when he came home, and I adored him. He was just so cool. He was just a cool kid. And I always wanted my girlfriends and everyone to come over and meet him because he just had this presence. I don't know. Like I said, he ran for president at TCU, and his thing was, his slogan was all the way with JFK. And he just had that look of a leader. Oh, and I do have one other thing to tell you. I just thought of this. On the day that it happened, first of all, his soon-to-be fiance, he was going to give her a ring at Christmas. Heidi Heineman was sitting on the... What?
You still stay in touch with her?
Yes, I'm a Zeta too, and she was a Zeta back then. And yes, I've gotten to talk to her and see her at reunions and stuff, and we're still close. But anyway, he was going to ask her to marry him, like in a month. And what was the other thing? Oh, I know. And so on the day that it happened, he worked at Clyde Campbell. It was a men's store in Fort Worth. And he went to the manager of the store and he asked him, and he modeled for him and did like the Skiff is the newspaper there, and he did ads and stuff. And he asked Glenn if they sold any kind of protective like belt, like to put around him under
Really?
clothes. Yeah. And I didn't find this out until like a year later from Glenn, that was his boss. And that was weird. And then it was also weird that I wanted to come home not knowing anything was wrong, but I just had to be home. So that's a couple of things that I thought.
Like some premonitions.
Yeah, totally. Because there was no reason.
I remember the night before this, I was in the bath and I thought about a friend of mine, you might know, Jenny Nemec. I don't know if you remember the Nemec.
Yeah.
Okay. So sadly, she's lost her brother, her mother, and her father. And she's young, she's 45 years old. And so I remember she and I don't talk very often, but we're friends. Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in the bath and I'm thinking about Jenny Nemec. And I thought, this is exactly what I thought. How did she move on? And how is she living on when that's happened to her? Yeah. And that was before. So it was almost like, and I thought, well, she's still here. So she obviously figured it out. And then my situation. Are there any songs or anything a song that comes on the radio that you think about, Tom?
Oh my gosh. It's Michael W. Smith, his album, Lead Me Home. And there's a song called Breathe in Me. Mm-hmm. And every time I play his music all the time in my car, going up back and forth to the barn. And every time I hear that music, I'm thinking, how can I send this song to Emily? Because it got me through a really hard time in 95 when I was blind for 5 weeks. I don't know if you knew about that, but I couldn't see for 5 weeks. So I laid in bed and I listened to Job on audio.
What happened? What?
Oh, I was blind for 5 weeks. I've had 9 eye surgeries in that eye and 8 in this eye. But that's a whole other story. Okay. But that song ministered to me so much because all I did was lay in bed in a dark room because I couldn't see. And it was just so awful that I just stayed in bed. And anyway, I listened over and over to the album by Michael W. Smith. It's called Lead Me Home. And it's like, especially the song Breathe, I think you'll really, I still cry when I hear it, when I think of you, because I feel like exactly what he's singing is what I needed. And I feel like it's what you need.
It's Breathe.
Yeah, it's called Breathe in Me.
Since it's been how many years since Tom passed away?
Okay, he's 4 years older. He was 4 years older than me. I'm 73. So he would be 74, say five. So he would be 77. And it happened. I'm terrible at math.
No,
It happened in 1965 and it's 2022.
So, all right. Well, let's just say it's been a long time.
Yeah, because if I was 14 and I'm 73 now, how many years is that? I can't even add that. 73 minus 14. A long time.
And I'm okay. I think 59 years ago.
You think?
Yeah.
That's amazing. 59. And I remember the day like it was yesterday.
That's what I think that's what I wanted to ask you. I'm hoping if I get another 40 or 50 years, who knows? This has changed my whole view about death and how soon it can happen. It can happen to anybody at any time, at any moment.
Yep.
How will I, how will this affect me as time goes on? I mean, obviously you're not, do you ever do the gut cry anymore? Or is it more just some tears shed a little bit?
I don't really wail anymore. Except for if there's something I find, like, I don't know, something that really reminds me of Tom, then I really will cry. I think the worst thing is he never got to get married like Chris. He never got to have children. Yep. You know, he never got to know his nieces and nephews.
Right.
You know, he never, I mean, all the things that he missed at such a young age, that bothers me really more than anything. I can't imagine only living 19 years.
Pam, there's something that, and I don't know if I texted this to you, but something that really has been bothersome to me through all this, and I know you can relate. Yeah. I actually belong to a group now called Loss of a Sibling. A sibling is like the lens to your childhood.
Yeah.
And even though I know you're madly in love with Mike, and I know you're madly in love with your kids and your grandkids, but something about the four of you, and there's nobody left now to know what happened at those dinner tables, what happened on those trips, what mom and dad were really like. That to me, when I lose my parents, and when you lost your parents, you had to do that alone. You didn't have, I mean,
I didn't have anyone.
You had Mike and you had the kids, but it's different. And you and I, we loved big, and we loved our immediate family.
Yeah.
And you lost your parents, and you had to make health decisions for your parents. You didn't have Tom.
I know.
And you're not able to call him right now and say, remember when mom used to make the candy pizza,
right, you know, right. Pizza candy. Yeah.
Remember, or, hey, gosh, remember that time mom embarrassed us, or just whatever.
Yeah. I know.
You basically became, we are not only children, but we are.
Yeah. That's why.
And your childhood. And I can't get past that.
Well, I tell you what, I became a McCoskey before I ever married Mike, because my mom and I, because my dad died at 64 and my mom was only 59. So I was 26 when my dad died, and that was pretty young. Yeah,
that's true.
Well, it's an interesting story. When that's
as traumatic as Tom, because that's very young.
I know. Well, what happened when my brother was born? No, when my brother was 9 months old, my dad was diagnosed with lymphatic leukemia, and they gave him 2 years to live. So that was in 1944, I guess, 44. And yeah, because I'm born in 49. So anyway, so I, of course, didn't know anything about this. I wasn't even born yet. And my mom, of course, I'm sure was horrible for her. And he never really showed the signs. I mean, he never went into remission. He never went into the hospital, and he just kind of got okay. And that went on until 1978, that he was totally healthy. And then in 1978, right before Blake was 2, my dad actually passed away in his sleep. But, you know, the chemo, I mean, the cancer came back, but only for a year. And he was never hospitalized, and he never really felt bad. In fact, the day before he died, he played golf out at Rolling Hills and called me.
Could it have been his heart? Could it have been his heart?
No, it was the leukemia, I guess. I mean, they did an autopsy and there was nothing really wrong with his heart. He died in his sleep. My mom, I mean, like I talked to him on the phone, and that is one big regret that I have. He called me and wanted me to come out to Rolling Hills to have lunch with him. And Blake was asleep. You know, he was almost two. And I just said, "Oh, Dad, I wish I could, but I can't wake him up now. And I'm going to see you on Wednesday," because my mom and dad would come in town every Wednesday so I could play tennis, and my mom would get her hair done and her nails done, and my dad would babysit Blake. So anyway, that was horrible. And then, of course, my mom lived to be almost 90, and she never dated. She never wanted to date. She said she could never find a man like Ed, like Dad. And, but she was such a doting person anyway on her friends, her kids, her grandkids. She just made her whole life about Pam and Mike and the kids.
So I didn't realize you lost your father that young. That's a whole other story in itself. Pam, you are such a strong woman, and I wonder if some of this has been part of that.
I feel like I don't know how strong I am, but I'm really grateful. I'm grateful every single day of my life. And there's so many reasons to be grateful. And I look at what happened to me and I look at what happened to you, but I always feel like anything that really touches us in such a way that's so deep and so hard to accept, then we're able to minister to other people. And that's what I try to do. And I know you're the same way.
And I know how much you love Tom because I know about him. I know so much about him because I'm talking about him since I've known you. Yeah. And that the grief is the price of love.
Yeah.
And we had big love. And I'm just glad to see that you were at least able to move on. You'll never move on from it, but be able to. Did your mother ever, was there a day where maybe she just cried a little less?
Oh no, she cried about my brother until the year before she died when she was like 3 weeks shy of 90. And she always talked about Tom. She had pictures of Tom. She grieved till she died about Tom.
And I know my parents will too.
Yeah.
Were your grandparents still alive?
No, none of my grandparents. No, that's what was really hard for me, because not only did I feel like it should have been me, and then after my mom and dad died, that really affected me all over again, because then I was like the only one left. And that was kind of.
Do you have any immediate cousins or not close?
Well, I had Mike. Mike is my rock, and I had all my best girlfriends and stuff like that. All the people in Wimbledon. But
the friends you can choose your friends, and the friends can really be supportive.
Yeah,
during times like this.
Yeah, I remember Sharon Nolan, especially, was really, really helpful when my dad passed away, and also when my mom passed away. But, no matter what anyone says, you never get over it. You should never get over it, because their memory is such a blessing in your life. And I know a lot of your friends probably, well, maybe not, maybe they're more sensitive, but most people after something like this happens,
they want to move on.
Yeah. They don't want to talk about it. And what we need at that point is to talk about it. Yes. And I think that was the hardest thing for me. I do remember right after my dad died, we were having the whole family over in Arlington for Father's Day. And so I had made this whole meal and everything. And the kids were, junior high or grade school, or I'm not sure how old they were. They were old enough to know that I lost it. So anyway, I made this whole thing, and we were all sitting down to dinner, and it just hit me. We're celebrating Phil and Cliff and Mike and Bernie and everyone being a father. I don't have a father. And I had to leave the table. I went into my closet and was in the fetal position, bawling. And that's something I didn't expect. That was something when all my kids were, I think Tyler was probably in 7th grade or something.
Did
And
your
they saw
mom,
me like that.
yeah, they saw you. And did your mom, when your mom lost her husband, what was it different grief? Was it similar or was probably different?
It was different. She just felt really grateful to have had him all those years. He should have died in 1945, and he died in 1978. So she really felt like that was a huge blessing that she had him as long as she did. But I can't even imagine being 59 and losing Mike. That is still so young.
I
So
can't imagine.
yeah,
Imagine you. I can't imagine you losing Mike because he is such a rock in your life.
he is my rock.
He's your best friend.
He is my best friend, and he is my rock. And I just am so grateful that the Lord put him in my life. We met on the golf course when we were 14, right after
Yes.
I moved. Yeah.
And I'm sorry about Phil.
I
I texted.
know.
I know they must have been very close, twin brother.
Yeah. Well, they weren't twins, but they were 2 years apart.
Years. Why did I think that?
I don't know.
About that anyway.
No, but they were in practice together, and it was 2 years ago on November 23rd.
So
And
Phil years, okay. Or Mike was 2 years younger, or Phil was 2 years
no,
younger.
Mike's the oldest.
Mike's oldest.
Mike, and then yeah.
Yeah, Phil actually worked with my brother when he had some injuries in
Really?
in football and baseball. But yeah. So I really appreciate you sharing. We maybe sometime I would love to have another more happy interview. I want to have you on again. We're going to be Just Lean In is going to be much more than just a weight loss company. We're actually especially since this happened, we're going to be bringing experts in on different subjects, like just lean into grief, just lean into autism, just lean into.
I love that.
Yeah. So I would love to. You're such like an inspiration to me, and you are. People ask, what drove you? Well, you're one of them, and so I want to talk about you and I are so similar. Well, okay, here's where we're a little bit different. You are actually much more Martha Stewarty than me. You do, you do cookies, and you do like you're much more of a nester than me. But what's cool about you is that you're an entrepreneur and a nester. I love my kids, I do, and we do fun things together. But you're much more like creative, and as far as like doing the things at home and kids, I hire people to do stuff. So that's the difference. But where we're very similar is that you went against the grain, and you were self-disciplined, and you worked out hard. And I love the way that you raised the kids. I remember Blake, in school was always a little bit different in a way that he, like, I remember you guys were like, you got to get your homework done first, before you're going to do the next thing. And when other kids would be out messing around, he would be sitting by the school finishing that homework. He was very self-disciplined.
He was self-motivated. I mean, he was so self-motivated that when he went to St. Stephen's, because he wanted to get a scholarship to SMU, which he did get for tennis, but he went to St. Stephen's, and it's down in Austin, and it's a private school. And he was told if he went there that he would have a much better opportunity to get a scholarship. And so he went there. And okay, now where was I going with this?
We were talking about how self-motivated he was.
Yeah. So anyway, they had all these awards at the end of the session. It was a whole school year. He lived at the tennis ranch, and they took him on a bus to school in New Braunfels, and that's how he spent a year. You might remember that because it was so hard for me. Yeah, he was gone at a really young age. And
I remember that.
And so anyway, but when he was there, I learned this later from the coach, but they had like an awards thing at the end, and Blake got the biggest award there was, and it was for the most dedicated, person on the team. And like Blake, I mean, he was okay smart, but he never really excelled. I mean, like he wasn't like straight A student by any means.
Look, there's a poem called Press On, and and I'll send it to you. It reminds me of Blake and it reminds me of me. It's a persistence and determination are way above education, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
He,
No,
he
he
had
would
that.
go. They told me, his coach told me after he won this award, and it was really sweet. And he said he might not be the best tennis player on the court, but he is the best person that I could, tell people that this is someone you want to be or whatever. But he would go in the mornings before school and he would run up and down the concrete things like on overpasses, like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And no one asked him to do that. He would just do stuff like that. And,
I know.
he was just.
I want to do a whole other. So a couple of things that in the future down the road, I would love to interview you on how you wrote your book, like how you wrote your book while being a mom. Because I remember then you went on the tour. I want to hear all about that.
Okay.
I want to hear about how, because you really influenced, I know you influenced your kids and your children have done so well. And I want other parents to see like how, I don't know that people really understand that, like Paige, for example, she did that herself. She was not handling anything. I think her grandmother gave her a sewing machine or something.
Yeah.
This had nothing to do with Blake. This had nothing to do with anybody. This was Paige. And as a matter of fact, Paige's business, is booming. It really, obviously Tom's Shoes is great. But right now, you remember Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson, like Janet Jackson, like Paige. Paige is in the limelight right now. Blake better watch out.
Well, she and she got the idea. I think you've heard this story.
Yeah, because what was she got money? You gave her money for her birthday?
Well, no. What happened? Okay, Blake was in Argentina. And, and he was learning to play polo and his teacher was named Alejo and he found him on Craigslist. So he was down there learning to play polo. I won't tell you the whole Tom story because you already know it. I just want to tell you this one part because it's pretty fascinating. So he was down there and then Paige, I was with her in California. Well, it was 2008, 2 years after Blake started Tom's and Paige started Aviator Nation. And it was 2 years later and he was moving to a sailboat. He wanted to live on a sailboat. Yeah, he lived on a sailboat for 5 years. And so anyway, he was down there and he said, Mom, look, you know what? We're cleaning out his shelves and stuff. And he goes, look, here's my journal of the day I started Tom's. And so I opened it up and I looked at it and there's a picture of a Tom's, buy one today, give away a pair tomorrow, Tom's Shoes for Tomorrow, February 26, 2006. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he goes, Mom, I know it's Paige's birthday. I said, no, you have no idea. On that day, that very day, I was in California for a week to spend her birthday with Paige. And my mom had given her $100 and Mike's dad had given her $100. And she woke up on that day and she opened the cards and she looked at me and she said, I want to go buy a used sewing machine and start a clothing line. Same day.
So they had, that is amazing.
Is that crazy?
That is crazy. And I know that Paige and Blake are really close. Well, I know they were all three very close. Yeah. And I remember when they were on Amazing Race.
That was
kind of the start of everything.
Yeah.
And we can edit. We're probably going to edit some of this out, but I just wanted to tell you that I remember because Blake had some, people just look at the glory. They don't look at the story.
Yeah.
Blake and I were talking about different businesses that I remember way back, many ideas and many things that he had. And some of them worked and some of them didn't.
Right.
And I took a very similar path. We actually, we both tried a couple of the same companies, to be honest with you. And then he veered off to the cleaners business. Yep. And then he did
Easy Laundry.
Then he did the advertising on the shopping carts.
Yeah.
And then Amazing Race. And then after Amazing Race, I think he started was looking into starting a cable network. And then all of a sudden, boom, he hit it. And here's the thing, this is how we feel with Just Lean In. Just Lean In has been brewing since I was born. It has been brewing all my life. And so, we're obviously not where Blake is yet. And it was funny when I talked to Blake about this business, he goes, call me back when you hit $1 million. And I'm like, all right, we're going to, just the fact that you said that, we're
I
going to
know.
do it. And I will. And he did. And he said, I will look at you when you hit $1 million. And so it's baby steps. But it's all been brewing. And when we hit it big, and I know that we're going to, and we're on our way, it won't be, oh, that Emily girl got lucky. No. I've had tragedy and hardships and so many things along the way, and parties I didn't go to, and drinks I didn't have, and nights that I'm sitting here brainstorming with my team, and times I'm maybe missing games. There's a lot that goes behind making a startup work.
But for sure.
But getting back to you, so I'm really interested in interviewing you about how you raised these children to do the things they did, and the things they've accomplished. And then also I want to hear about your story with Butterbusters. But thank you for joining us tonight. And I love that you talked about Tom. I know that you're passionate about him. I got to learn more about him tonight. And thank you for being there for me. And thank you for the beautiful flowers and the cross you sent me and my parents. And thank you for being my friend. And I know we're always going to be friends. And I'll never be able to tell you how much I appreciate our friendship. When you get a text message from somebody that the worst tragedy of their life, that should tell you where you rank in the friends.
Oh, well, thank you, Emily. And I'm just so proud of you. It's been so fun watching you grow your company already and your team. And I think it's remarkable. And I think you're ministering to so many women on more levels than just say losing weight. I mean, there's so much more to it. And that's so exciting. And I'm just proud of you.
Thank you, Pam.
You're my child. You're one of my daughters. I'm proud of you.
And I love you. And you tell we are going to get it to $1 million, and I am going to call him.
I know. And the funny thing is, when he started, this is where I think he got this. When he started Reality Central, that was the TV network after they did the race. And he went to this guy who started the E! Channel. And he told him that he wanted to start, Reality Central. And he had all of these people from Survivor and Big Brother and all these people that wanted to invest in him and have a reality television network. And so he went to this guy, I think his name was Larry. He had something to do with E! Magazine or E! Channel. And Blake gave him his idea, and he said, Larry, I think it was Larry, he said, Blake, you come back to me when you have $1 million. Blake had $1 million. He had $1 million the next day by investors. Because all of the reality people that were on the shows, they all kind of became a community. And, like Tina from Survivor, and what was his name with the curly hair? He actually was when Paige did the Miss America thing last year, when she was a judge for Miss America. He was on he was one of the judges as well. And it was the guy from the very first Survivor, I think.
Everything happens it all intertwines.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Thing. And you know what? I just, and Blake actually gave me a lot of advice when we did RVs for MDs, when we did that whole, we actually had him on for a show, and we've remained good friends. I really think for Blake and I, though, I think the connection that we share is that we're both entrepreneurs. He's a little bit more ahead of me right now, but I'm going to catch up.
Yep. I guarantee you will. I guarantee you will.
Thanks, Cam. I love you.
I love you too.
Talk later.
Okay. Bye.
When times were hard, we understand that life was tough, but now you have us forever. You're special, yeah. Just lean in. You'll never be alone. Get out of bed, 'cause you have friends. We know you'll